We have a killer app. We ran into this the last couple of years, where all of a sudden segments that I call human communities. Really, these are communities that are forced to make sure that they have their own water self-sufficiency, like housing developments, like trailer parks, motorhome campgrounds, freeway travel stops, hotels. We already have a number of customers already in these areas who are paying. What we're going to do with this is simply putting the icing on the cake by adding water on demand to accelerate the adoption, make it simple. So it's a full acceleration.
Welcome everyone again, and Tom Liakos, hello everyone. Hello, sir. And it's going to be a great show. Turns out we're doing things in New Orleans about the saltwater intrusion, so that's going to be a nice story. So without further ado, all right, Water the Blue Gold, Thursday, October 12th, briefing number 232. Water is the people's asset. Usual disclaimers. All right, so I was very interested in this because in this economy, who is doing well? Well, it turns out that the baby boomers are doing well. They accounted for the highest share since records began in 1972. Let's take a look at the graph here. So rising, wow, basically pretty steadily since 2005. And the other cohorts, we have the, it's hard to tell, but that top dotted line seems to be the 45 to 54s. They've been going down, but now they've been recovering, and the other cohorts are pretty much in the same range. The real losers are the 25 to 34 years old. This group needs better paying jobs. And of course, it turns out that the water industry needs 7 million jobs, what we call the silver tsunami, and these are quality jobs. Now, here's the deal. They're not going to be jobs in a conventional municipal utility because the funding's not there. This will happen in private water companies that have taken up the load from the central utilities. So basically, you'll be in the private sector in these fast-growing private water companies. Of course, we are part of those, and we also plan to acquire more of those. And that's a very exciting story that I'll be telling one of these fine days because it's so exciting. New Orleans, as I was saying, New Orleans salt invasion. There's a story in USA Today. And this is about basically a wedge-shaped layer of dense salt water has been pushing upstream. And the river is so weakened by drought, it cannot keep the ocean water at sea. Well, that is very bad because, of course, bottled water, etc. Lots of barges are coming up or down, I guess, down the river with millions of fresh water. And that's threatened by the fact that the river levels are so low, it's very hard to get those barges across. And then it says here, efforts include installing reverse osmosis filters, and which I'll tell you more about, and running new pipes that can bring fresher water. Here is somebody using boiling bottled water for cooking. And here we have supposedly rain is coming, but we shall see. They're also putting it what's called a sill, like a door sill, basically, that hopefully keeps it's like a reverse dam in a way. And then there's all these, human interest stories. But this problem, of course, is we've had a lot of losses this year. 40 days of critically low water caused an estimated $20 billion in losses. That's pretty intense. And here we go. It's been actually happening a lot, 1988, 99, 2012, and last year, but it's worse, supposedly. And here they are working in the water utility to fix the reverse osmosis system there. Water is not safe to drink if you have kidney problems, etc. And you can't boil it out. Oh, we all know that you can't boil salt water out. Can't use it for cooking, can't really use it for drinking. Well, can't use it. You could kind of use it for cooking. Like I like to put salt in my pasta water anyway. And here's the problem. Salt water can corrode hot water heaters, etc. But also there's still lead drinking water pipes all over the place, just like Flint, Michigan. And the salt can leach the lead into the water. How fun is that? All right. So And additionally, salt levels in the soil could build up over time. And it affects the fishing, et cetera. Here are flexible pipeline that's being temporary pipelines. They're planning to deliver up to 36 million gallons of water each day if needed. And here we go. Louisiana facilities are installing reverse osmosis filters at water treatment plants. More about this shortly. So what are we doing about it? Well, we've been asked to commission a series of 125 gallon per minute desalination plants. This is reverse osmosis. Each one of them being 180,000 gallons per day for the drinking water plants. And as we know, the Army Corps of Engineers also barging it. So that's our job. We're basically supplying a series. It's relatively easy to do because this is not very salty water. It's brackish, but it has to be done. And we've been asked, and we are currently building a series of these. So that's very cool. And Keith Rutten says, I'm from Nolens. That is sad. Indeed it is. Well, Keith, the real problem is that we should not be having a bunch of building in the Livy areas. We had a historic opportunity after Katrina to not rebuild in those areas, at least the lowest areas, and just let them turn back into wetlands, which would absorb a lot of this water. But people started rebuilding naturally enough, and here we are. Really what we need to do is better water conservation upstream. There's nothing much New Orleans can do about it. AI replacing CEOs. Well, I'm a CEO part of the time when I'm not doing dishwashing or whatever. And turns out that nearly half of CEOs believe that AI not only could, but should replace their own jobs. Well, excuse me. Here we go. 47%. They see it desirable at AI taking over their roles, because they anticipate that AI could rekindle the need for traditional leadership for those who remain. Success in the CEO role hinges on effective leadership, and AI can liberate time for this crucial aspect. Basically, no more drudgery. That's the idea. Less drudgery and more knowledge work, good, proper innovation, creativity, team building, and so forth. So CEOs aren't going anywhere. Okay, now I feel better. But 79% of executives fear that if they don't learn how to use AI, they'll be unprepared. And so there's a scramble going on right now. The other day, I built a logo using Bing, and it was ridiculously easy. So it's basically like, tell me what to do, I'll do it. The problem, of course, is that very easy to get garbage. AI won't take your job. It's somebody using AI that will take your job. AI may not replace managers, but the managers that use AI will replace the managers that do not. Now, how does this, apart from it affecting people like me in the CEO job? And Timothy says, I choose you as my CEO any day over AI. Says, okay, well, thank you. And I love it. I'm glad some people think that AI should not replace me, because I just want to say, I am not artificial intelligence. I may not be intelligent, but I'm not artificial. Let's put it that way. But anyway, the reason why this matters is because AI will dramatically simplify the job of running the water on demand network. It's going to take a tremendous amount of, for good designers. And as you know, we have an agreement to acquire a software company to build that water on demand network. And so what we have is an opportunity to leverage AI to do load management, for example, and things like that. So that could be very, very interesting. So this is a good time to be building networks, isn't it? All right, here's a quick podcast. Let's take a look at what we said. This is a new podcast, Escaping the Drip. Let's see what happened.
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. This is John Gafford. And today, man, I've got... being how I live here in Las Vegas, it's obviously water is something that is always on the top of mind with us. And today we've got an interesting guest. His name is Riggs Eckelberry. He is the CEO, that's Chief Executive Officer, for those of you that don't know, and also chairman of the board for a company called OriginClear. And essentially what we're going to talk about today on this podcast, among other things, is yes, we like to talk about the origins of rigs. Anytime I can get a C-level executive that has done as well as he have, we want to pick his brains to try to get some clues to success and how to get you where you want to go. But also we're going to have an interesting conversation about the future of water on this planet, because he is a guy that is well-versed in these subjects. And obviously, if you're the CEO of a major company that is in the privatization of the water industry, he's a guy that knows what he's talking about. So welcome, Riggs. Happy to have you.
John, that's a very generous intro. Thank you.
So tell us, let's talk a little bit about the history of water as far as, and people, when we talk about water, what we're talking about is when you turn that tap on and you can fill a glass up and drink it, or you can take a shower. Talk to us about a little about the history of water, where we started, where we got to here.
Right. Well, as you know, late 19th century and the first part of the 20th century, right up to 1950, saw a tremendous amount of public works, right? We saw the Hoover Dam being built.
Yep.
Back east, this massive Delaware reservoir system that New York benefited. New York, for the longest time, had, New York bagels were the best bagels because of the water, right? Mm-hmm. So
pizza too.
These were big projects, and they were very lavish. And in fact, the Hoover Dam, literally, they would lose people all the time. Like people would fall into the concrete cofferdams and then disappear. It was a time when you could get a lot of that stuff done very easily, but post-war things changed. And especially we saw less and less allocation for infrastructure. And starting in 1960, the graph for operation and maintenance just rises continuously all the way into the present. In other words, that's like never quite fixing your Toyota Celica, kind of like put water into the radiator every 20 miles kind of thing. So costs for just keeping things going have continued to rise, but there's been way underfunding on critical infrastructure. And as you know, industry has only grown, population has only grown. And now we're looking at things like reshoring, where deglobalization is going to bring manufacturing back, all kinds of pressures. And not to mention the most important one these days is migration from city centers to exurbia, to rural areas that may not be able to cover the load.
I'm assuming that that's what causes things like the Flint, Michigan problem with the lead pipes and those sorts of things. I mean, they outlawed lead paint in the 60s. Now we're still drinking water that's flowing through it. Is that part of this problem?
100%. Well, here's the issue that it was actually a mistake. It was a stupid mistake made where somebody tried to save $500 on anti-corrosion chemicals, and that's it. The lead just went into everything. The water heaters, it's ruined the entire downstream distribution into the homes, which is
okay. So I just, you glance at things, and if they don't, it's like anybody else, if it doesn't affect you directly, you tend to glance. You don't necessarily dig too much. And I always thought it was a problem with the infrastructure of the pipes. That was just an additive that went accidentally through a water treatment facility and caused that.
No, to be clear, they were lead pipes, but there's technology to keep the lead from leaching into the water.
Got it.
And that chemical literally costs like $500 a day, nothing much. But because Flint was in receivership, they were in bankruptcy, they were cutting costs all along. Here's the central problem, John, is that 90% of all water on demand is by industry and agriculture.
Yeah.
And it's tended to weigh down on water rates. Do you know that water and sewage rates have inflated as much as college tuition has, which is already horrible, right? So it's literally right there with it. People don't realize it, but it's been skyrocketing, and still it does not cover the costs. We're running right now a $100 billion a year annual deficit on needed infrastructure in America. And 90% of it is the needs of industry, and we've got the solution.
Well, before we get to your solution, as it is, how much of this could be solved? I mean, obviously, if you look at anywhere online, you just Google future water rights, and we deal with this a lot in Las Vegas. We have people that are moving here, and they say things like, "You're going to run out of water in 10 years." That's what they say, because the Google said it, or somebody on Facebook said it. And I've spent a lot of time talking to the water district here, the folks that run things here and how things work. And luckily for us, Las Vegas is one of the most water conscious cities on earth. 95% of everything that comes out of the faucet goes back and gets recirculated. The only thing we lose here is irrigation through landscaping. He says that's the loss of what we're losing. And they've really tightened the belt through that in Vegas with the size of pools that can be built on new things. They've made you, if you have grass, they cut it back. We've lost any public green space that is not actively used as surface area for a park is going. I mean, they've been ripping it up all over town forever. They've also been utilizing new technologies. F1 is coming here in the end of November, and that is just a massive event. And they said every day they'll need 40,000 gallons to wash the track down. And sure. What they're utilizing to generate that water, there'll be no drag on our water table for that because they're using technology they got from Dubai to integrate with the steam overflows from some of the larger casinos to capture that steam, turn it into water, and put it in the tankers to use that to wash the track. So innovation like that, those things like vertical farming, things like, what are some of the things that you're on the forefront of for making a difference?
First of all, it's wonderful that Las Vegas is doing that. They're on a par with Israel, which is also a big leader in recycling, roughly 90%. If you look at the graphs, Singapore is another leader, Malta, but these are controllable, Las Vegas, these are controllable microcosms that can be managed. What we have, if you look at the map of out-migration from the cities, it's been like this explosion, New York, boom, Chicago, boom, and so you have this like a problem of people moving to places where it's not easy to control, right? Yeah. Or, for example, we moved from Los Angeles to Pinellas County here in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, sure. I'm a Tampa guy. There you go. Originally a Tampa guy. There you go.
Right behind me is Clearwater, Florida, and we have the Blue Jays just up the street in Dunedin.
Sure.
On their spring training. But what we're seeing in Pinellas is it's built.
Yeah.
Where are you going to put more sewage? Where are you going to put more facilities? It's not going to happen. And is the not in my backyard issue. So it's really, really hard to do build outs. And what we're also seeing, for example, North Texas, between Dallas and the Oklahoma border, is in a phenomenal land boom where housing developments are outstripping the sewage infrastructure. And that's where we come in. We're literally helping them with their self-reliant needs. So you have situations that are not controllable, like Israel, like Las Vegas, like Malta, that are they're just all over the place. Now, what is the solution? We believe in unburdening the wastewater system, meaning that if 90% of the load is into industry and agriculture, then get industry and agriculture off the grid, and then the people can be serviced. You see, we believe that the water grid should primarily service ordinary people. And it's not. Right now, there's a lot of people are being foreclosed out of the defaulting on their water bills. Those water bills are too high because of industry and agriculture being on it. Now, it's not industry and agriculture's fault. It's what they've been given. But when we give them an alternative, they love it. Why? We say, hey, listen, we can give you your own water treatment system. What are the benefits? Number one, you'll be on a contract that guarantees the water treatment will be a certain cost and it won't explode like it has been with the municipality. Number two, you'll be able to recycle, which will give you at least 50% more water for your money, sometimes more, but that's a conservative estimate. And number three, you won't have all that pesky regulation, because when you're depending on the city, then they can say, well, we won't take your water today or whatever it is, right?
Sure.
All of a sudden, you're able to just manage your own stuff. And as long as you're staying within permit requirements, you're free to go. So they like that. Now, the fourth thing we've done, and this is our program called Water on Demand, is made it possible for these companies to get it without capital up front. So it's water as a service, and then just continue to pay on the meter as if they were, tied up to the city, but now they're tied up to us and we're managing them. And all they got to do is just sign a contract and they get their water treated, but it's on a self-reliant, independent basis, fully managed, and people love it. I mean, they're all for it.
Well, you're essentially doing exactly what the solar business, by taking people off the grid and privatizing their own production of electricity, you're just doing it with wastewater.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that unlike the energy companies, water districts are not resisting it. They're like delighted, like great. and I'm sure this would be true even in Vegas, like, oh, you want to take your local Amazon warehouse off the grid? Great, go for it, right? Yeah. Because they're in a situation where they're really dealing with water scarcity, overstressed infrastructure. I just saw a headline about some utility was unable to clean out some dioxane, and that got into the water supply. Well, why did the dioxane get into the system? Why not just make that polluter do it offline and treat it properly? And that solves it for everybody. We can really get these businesses off the grid, that they have like the Solar City kind of concept, right? Right. In other words, we're just private utility. We're doing a private utility gig. And the good news is that the water industry is appreciative of that. They're happy to let us do that. So the whole idea of decentralization is really taking off, right? Because first of all, in built up places like many metros in the US, where are you going to put the large plants? And then in developing countries like India, they don't even have the budget for proper sewage. So again, self-help, self-contained water treatment is where it's at. As you know, we were living in Los Angeles for a long time, and LA has these long concrete rivers, right? Yeah. That's where Greece was shot and so forth. Like, well, that's the Army Corps of Engineer thinking. Since then, they realized, no, we don't want to just wash all the water into the ocean. We want it to permeate into the groundwater, so that they're literally breaking all these things and creating greenways that absorb the water. So what I'm saying is the earlier concept of big is beautiful, centralized is best, lots of concrete, those ideas are going away, and it's more particular, right? It's more decentralized, more self-care. And that also is much, much better from a redundancy point of view, because right now central districts are very vulnerable to somebody messing around with their computers and potentially doing something. It hasn't been a major there've been attacks, they've been caught, but you're much safer. This was the whole concept of the internet in the first place. Was DARPA, the Defense Research Agency, came up with the idea of spreading out computer resources in the event of a nuclear attack. So one node goes down, everything else does not. Well, it's the same idea, that if you just take all your water liabilities and spread them out and make the users responsible for their own, the problem takes care of itself, and you're much more robust in terms of anti-hacking and so forth. So It's a good solution, makes a lot of sense. Now, we're not the only people doing it. We were very, very early talking about this. 2016, I was preaching about it, and nobody was like, "What? Decentralization? What are you talking about?" And what happened was that the markets caught up with us. And not only that, we're not the only player in what we call water as a service, but we're unique in the space because there's other companies doing this. Don't buy your machine, just take the machine and let us provide you with the product, and you pay by the gallon.
How big is this machine?
Oh, it can be, well, here's one of the challenges, of course, the technology challenge. And we have a division with patents on miniaturized systems coming out of the big, large-scale utilities down to the corner of a brewery, right? With 150 square feet kind of thing, right? And that's all you got. So we've actually done the miniaturization, and our systems are very compact, completely self-managing. In other words, everything you've got's in that box, done. Mm-hmm. All the controls, all the treatment systems, filters, you name it, it's all there. And it comes in on a semi, gets dropped in, boom, we're done. And so that's been solved by the chief engineer of the company, was a guru for decentralization 20 years ago when it was like really nothing at all. And so he's developed the concept. So that's taken care of, number one. Number two is the whole idea of water as a service, which is blossoming. For example, there's a recent unicorn that was created, which is called Gradient. And they have some MIT technology, and they're servicing the high-end users in pharma, in the chip industry, food and beverage, and energy. And those companies, for example, PepsiCo has committed to 80% recycling of all of their processed water. So there's major moves happening at the high end. We operate more at the everyday business level, the small to medium, $200,000 to $2 million kind of level, which is considered small in the water industry. And how we make it work is a great deal of standardization. Just, these are all like hotcakes. They go out like hotcakes, boom, 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 boom.
And and the other thing that makes us special is we're the only people doing this that are enabling everyday investors to become involved in this royalty generating water as a service, right? It's a lot like you ever looked at oil wells, how people can invest in oil wells and get a royalty.
Sure.
It's very similar now. We're doing it for water, and we're the only people doing it. So other players that we compete against are funded by Wall Street or by venture capitalists and so forth, and regular people can invest. And one of the things that we've learned is that people like you and me, our investing opportunities are limited. Like, where do we put our money? You know, I mean, I've got some gold ETF shares and they keep going sideways. I don't know what's going on. You know, there's a limited number of options. You know, real estate's doing pretty good as long as it's not commercial real estate. Mm-hmm. And so people are looking for opportunities to get ahead of the game. And, you know, you go farmland, oh, Bill Gates has that, you know. All these AI, that's been done. Everything's been done. Water is still early. And we're dedicated. We have our tagline is water is the people's asset, meaning we're dedicated to getting investors in on this early stage thing, which is just taking off, which is water tech. And that's exciting as hell.
How many of these systems have you guys installed to date?
Oh, conventionally, hundreds of thousands. I mean, it's a lot. As I say, one of our divisions has been in business for 25 years. So we have a lot installed. What's brand new is this don't pay for it up front thing, which is we just beginning on that. And for that, we have to get to these people long before, because our business is based on, oh, you figured out your problem, you got your consulting engineer, you figure out your finance, and you put it out for bid. And then we hear about that. Well, we need to get involved with those clients long before they've solved the finance problem. Because once you fix the finance, you're like, no, I don't want to hear about it. I'm good. I took care of it. It's fine. So we got to get people who have not figured it out. And there's lots of people out there that are suffering with, they're being fined, for example, or they're being forced to truck their water to another county, as often happens with breweries. They're just suffering, but they haven't gotten to solving. And that's the next audience we want to get to. So right now, the people we're servicing are the people who are ready and able. They got cash in the barrel. They're ready to go. And that's a big business. This growing, we tripled our business last year. We're rolling. We want to go even further into the potential business that they haven't yet figured out, what do we do? And we go, hey, you know, we talk to consulting engineers, give them the option. And now when they first talk to somebody like that, guy goes, hey, you know, you can do this without any capital up front. So that's the big new thing, the new frontier. But we're building on a base of very solid and growing business in the regular paid water systems, but it's all decentralized.
And continuing right on here, I think we have time for one more. Why not? Yeah, this is a good one. This is the second part of the one I was having with Mr. RJ Ahmed. Here we go.
Like back in I think 60s or some 70s, somebody was able to figure it out how to run cars on water. And then that person was, he became unknown, like nowhere to be found or something like that. He was like completely out of the blue because that person actually figured out how to use water instead of oil to run cars, stuff like that. So so my question to you is, do you think in the future, water in terms of using it in resources in replace of oil can be taken in some places?
Well, you're thinking of H2O as an elemental, chemistry, as an elemental molecule. And the problem is, of course, it's very tightly bound. Generally the cleavage of hydrogen and oxygen is more energy intensive than the energy you get out of it, right? Because they're tightly bound. Same thing for CO2, right? It's energy intensive to get the carbon away from the oxygen. Now, will people find ways to do it? I think so, but I think that right for now is, first of all, as you say, there people come up with these ideas and then disappear. So I have no idea that, we can have conspiracy theories about it, or we can just conclude the biggest problem in technology is getting technology to market.
I can have a great idea. It's fantastic. But until it comes out of what I call the clutter ghetto, right? Clutter ghetto, meaning all the noise that's going on in the world, and I've got to break out of that clutter ghetto, the zoo of look at this morning I was catching up on all the news about the world, and it took me a half hour just to skim all the headlines. So much going on, and you've got to break out of it somehow, and that requires more of a marketing focus than most innovators have. And that's, again, it comes back to this idea of break to build. This original person, which I've heard about, like you know, using water to drive cars. Again, that's a break to build concept, right? I got to break the fossil model to build a new one. But in order to do that, you've got to break through technology, but now you've got to break through on the marketing side. And that, I think, is the biggest challenge of all. And of course, you've got lobbies, vested interests that don't want it to happen. But the biggest problem, in my opinion, is not political, it's marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one is definitely, as you mentioned, like marketing, if nobody actually knew about it, even if you get like disappeared, nobody even knew like where you gone. But on the other side, you're kind of like competing with a $1 trillion industry that is running like solely on oil, stuff like that, which is another massive sort of, challenge according to that. Since we were talking about water, on the other side, like Elon Musk actually tried to do something similar, but with the electric side of it, and like kind of like using electric vehicles instead of like running on oil, diesel, stuff like that, and was able to kind of like revolutionize and kind of like reducing the use of oil somehow in cars and like making it that way, but having more resources, more marketing, stuff like that, as you mentioned.
Well, what was brilliant about Elon, and this is another important thing, in the break to build formula, is he attacked the easiest side of it, which is the hard part is the source fuel itself. He just transferred the burning of fossils from the car to the power plant. You say that's bad. Well, yeah, but it's a step in the right direction. He's literally said that. It's like, look, I know that EVs don't use less energy if you count what's coming from the power plant. However, it's a step in the right direction. And, by getting the EV platforms going, that centralizes the power demand. And now you can address the power generation problem creatively with a variety of geothermal and a ton of different ways, nuclear, that you can't have a nuclear engine in a car, but you can have a nuclear power plant. So when you centralize it, you're able to use much more potent solutions. So one aspect to finding a way forward is to find a micro application, part of the problem. Let's take our water car inventor person, right? How do you take that and find the easiest step to get it adopted in some application somewhere? And maybe it's in irrigation motors or something stupid, right? Yeah. So you have it going somewhere, and that's proof of concept, and it gets traction, and then you're able to do more. So that was the brilliance of Elon Musk, is that he didn't try to tackle the entire problem. Really, it's illogical to have a gasoline-powered independent device, whether it's a lawnmower, whether it's a car, et cetera. These things should all run on electricity, logically, right? That's how it should be. I think that's the brilliance of it. Now, how do we apply this to water? Well, what we did was, we're going to help businesses do their own water treatment. Let's start with the ones that have a real problem today. They don't have a choice. And our business has been doubling and tripling on a year-to-year basis, helping people who are forced to do it. They are separated from sewage. For example, we had a client who had a mobile home park, a trailer park. I don't know if you have them in Pakistan, but there are lots of them in the US. They were forced to. Why? Because they were too far from the city for sewage, and they were being fined a lot of money by the local environmental agency. And so they had to put in their own water treatment. That's an ideal customer for us right now. So the people who are forced by economic circumstance, i.e. too far from sewage, and also regulatory circumstance, i.e. being fined, that nexus is our customer base today. Now, it won't be our customer base tomorrow, but that creates people who must have self-reliant water treatment. They must have it. Right now in the north of Texas, there is a land boom going on. They're building housing developments much faster than they can build water treatment facilities. And so we are putting in
containerized modular water treatment. You can see it on our YouTube, OriginClear's YouTube. There's one place called Munson Point, which is just on the edge of Oklahoma. And we put in a simple container, no water expertise required to maintain it, just a regular facilities manager. And that's done. It's taken care of. No running of sewage lines or anything like that. So that's the audience we're talking to, is people who have to have it. The reason why we're putting in place water on demand is for the next generation, which is people who would like to have it, for 3 reasons. Number one is so that they can control their water and sewage rates, which in America are inflating as fast as college tuition, which we know is inflating very fast. Secondly, they can recycle under their own control, which reduces their water costs. And thirdly, they're free of interference from the local government, because as long as they meet the requirements, they can just put the water into the ground and everybody's happy. So for those 3 reasons, people will be interested in doing it. And that's when they'll run into the capital need. In any kind of market, it's an inverse pyramid. You start with the people with a real need. They're a tiny percentage, right? They're like, I need it now. I got to have it. This is it. That's, 12, 14% of the market. The much bigger one is the people who have to have it, or who want to have it, right? Who think it's good. They have a strategic need for it. And then the final third, which is the most of all, is the people who just finally adopt it because everyone else is doing it. So yeah, that's where we're going into right now. So right now we're servicing the must-have, and we're starting to get into the want-to-have. And I think that's, again, going back to this break-to-build concept. If we're breaking the business model, start again with the smallest application that needs you the most, and get a business going that way, and progress from there.
Buyer cycle is also kind of like pretty similar with it. Like some people, like 3 to 4% are like instant buyers. They just want to have it, and then the other of them are kind of like aware of it, and they kind of like want it. On top of that, they're like, okay, they're kind of like getting it just because there is a trend. One of the last thing I really want to ask about is, I mean, like for us, like for all of us out there who probably living in US, Canada, like especially here in Pakistan, India, in some places for sure, like we take water for granted. But the people who are living in Africa, they have a lot of problems around that, a lot of, and I think in a lot of different sort of like organizations, they always try to kind of like figure out how to make it like even easier or more accessible for the people who are living in Africa, because I feel like that is the sort of like the continent that faces the most amount of problems in terms of getting the even cleaner water accessed. So like, what do you think about that in the longer perspective? I mean, like that maybe like tap into that side of the world as well. So what are your thoughts around it?
50% of African cities have not yet been built. In other words, there's so much pent up growth. I think there's an opportunity in building those future cities to embed a decentralized model. For example, let's take a look at India, where there is no sewage infrastructure. Well, the solution then is self-reliant. You take a housing cluster, give them a module, boom, and they take care of themselves. That comes back to capital, right? How do you finance it? Because everybody's up for it, but who's got the money? Same thing in Africa.
Yes.
If we can put in place a formula, a flow where investors come in, it funds the capital, which then gets the projects done, and then people pay by the gallon, then we have a lot of mini utilities, mini municipalities, which are private. And I think that will, first of all, create a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities, right? Because now you can run for your town. A neighborhood in Islamabad, you've got an entrepreneur who's providing clean water and treating the dirty water, and it's all happening, and it's delegated. They don't have to. The city is happy to see it. Why? Because they're overwhelmed. Right? Yep. We see this in the US. They're like, fine, treat your own water, because they just don't have the funding, and they can't raise water rates more than they are. I think that's going to happen universally. I think that over time, water treatment entrepreneurs will arise who will treat these things in these little clusters. A good friend of mine is in Mexico. Now, Mexico is a booming economy. They're falling behind on infrastructure. In fact, this friend of mine has a river running through his neighborhood called the Ayotac, and it looks like rainbows. It's got so much pollution, right? And because the Mexican industries, they just dump it. They don't treat it. His business is based on working with the American companies that have subsidiaries in Mexico that have to meet their American requirements. And so they are trying. Where he is going in the future is, instead of trucking all the water from all those places, put individual treatment modules at all these locations
He's saving all this trucking, because you're trucking 99% water when you're trucking sewage, right? So he'd save all that trucking, and it becomes self-sufficient, and he makes money a different way. This is a new business model. It's entrepreneurial, and like all government monopolies that break up, it creates huge opportunities for innovation.
Well, Riggs, again, thank you so much for being on the show today out there. Any last thing you want to say before we round the show up?
What I'm going to say is that we can solve every single problem we have out there in the world by breaking it down into consumable pieces, as we are doing in water. I think that's true of just about everything we're doing, and get away from the massive and start to get into the particular. And I think that's the way forward.
Awesome. Well, yeah, Riggs, again, thank you so much for being on the show today out there. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching. We're definitely going to see you guys in the next episode. Until then, peace out.
Lots of fun. Obviously, these two podcasts were so different. The one with the Las Vegas finance guy was very sophisticated, but I also enjoyed very much RJ Ahmed and talking to him. These are some very, very fun podcasts, and they also get the word out. All right. Marcus Walker. Hi, I received an email today about receiving more stocks because of the merger. How did that work? Don't get me wrong. I'm happy. Let me tell you how that happened. It's actually great news. Those of you who invested in the Regulation A offering, you received shares at $5 a share. And then what we did was Water on Demand, which is what you invest in, merged with Progressive Water Treatment, and it reset the share price at $2.39 because the combination. Well, we didn't want you guys to lose out, right? So what we did was we gave you a bunch more shares so that you have the same dollar value for your investment as before. So we've done this. We also did this with our Series A and Series B shareholders. These are shareholders who came in and who were granted shares in Water on Demand, free shares, but still we didn't want them to lose out. And so again, they agreed to convert into common shares because we have a merger in progress that I can't really discuss. But they agreed to convert to common, and we did the same thing. We grossed up the number of shares so that they wouldn't lose out on the dilution. So we just want to make, this is our rule, and this is why Ken and I have done well with our investors, is we always want you to end up right side up. And at the end of the day, what's the point of screwing a bunch of shareholders and moving on? First of all, it's bad karma. And secondly, you might need them down the road, as we have been in this process this year. So that's the picture. Again, we do plan to restart the Regulation A offering. But now it's no longer Water on Demand, it's Water on Demand plus Progressive Water Treatment. And the interesting part is Progressive Water Treatment became the name of the new company that is a target. If you check our announcements, you'll see that there was a letter of intent. I covered this in a recent briefing. That was with this blank check company which is on the NASDAQ, to acquire us. Anyway, long story short, the letter of intent was amended for Progressive Water. Now, why is it called Progressive Water? Because of the operating history of Progressive Water, which is more than 25 years. And so that's why the whole combination of Progressive Water, Water on Demand, Marginal Water Systems is called Progressive Water Treatment, Inc. today. However, we do plan to, that's not the final name, but that is what makes it work with the current merger process. All right. James Wright, what about OCLN shares purchased on open market? Soon I will need a conversation with Ken. Oh, I do think it's a good idea. Always a good idea to talk to Ken. Here's the thing about OCLN. What we've done is we've taken all of our best properties, we've packaged them up into this amazing property that is subject to this non-binding letter of intent. Again, can't get into it, but if you go to OriginClear News, there it is. So you can read all you want about it, but I can't really discuss it. So we've done a great job of, sending our kid to college, right? It's like, that's fantastic. Now, what about OriginClear? Well, number one, we own something like 90% of that company right now. It'll be less in the future, but it'll still be a huge percentage of it, which we believe is going to return beautifully. Number two is now we get to incubate more. We're going to bring in more, and we're getting better and better at this incubation. So we're really turning OriginClear into an incubation center. And the water industry needs those. There's plenty of incubators in the water industry, but they tend to be for the classic technology play. We're about this decentralization game, which we think is the huge future. All right. And yes, your questions about the entity that we have this letter of intent with, you need to discuss it with Ken. All right. So with that, we have the free-willing discussion. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, hello.
Hello, and welcome to the free-willing discussion.
I was always feeling underdressed, so I figured I'd put on a jacket today.
Because now we make Ken feel underdressed, but it's okay because it's his wife's birthday, and he's telling everybody, don't be noisy. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's our birthday. What are you talking about? So we covered a bunch of good stuff in this meeting, and I was responding on a bunch of the adjustments that were happening with the stock as we complete all this complex dance that's been going on. That's done. So buckle up, people, because what cannot be said in public could happen one day. And for that full briefing, you will have to talk to Ken under NDA. It is
now. I want to also couch that. Current available participation is limited to accredited investors. So under NDA, and again, I'm not going to go too deep with it even under NDA, but you'll have a very complete, comprehensive picture of kind of where we are and what's occurring in the very short term. But for those of you who are not accredited, currently there's no available options, but we want to hopefully, like as Riggs mentioned, if we can get to kind of that next station, we'll be able to hopefully make those available again for non-accredited investors. But Riggs and I were crunching numbers, and we are really excited about the possibilities and the potential. Like even I pulled you on a meeting there. I said, all right, walk me through this, because this is, and you did, and I was like, wow, I was really excited, because it's such a huge total market. The total addressable market is just phenomenal. And having an industry leading advantage, having this ability to miniaturize. Can I share a real quick story?
Yeah, we got 5 minutes.
Okay. I spoke with someone today who I originally spoke with a couple months ago. So they're doing processed water. I got $22 million of contracts of processing hydrocarbons, at oil sites. I said, great. I said, so let me see if I understand this correctly. You have to process millions and millions and millions of gallons a day in order to break even, because you have to literally dig a hole in the ground, pour concrete, lay pipes. So it's going to be millions of gallons a day or you're dead, right? He goes, yeah, absolutely. And if they don't pay? I said, so it's a wonderful market that you're in, but you have to be extraordinarily selective about who you can do business with. They have to be Amex Black card holders, right? I mean, they have to be the Amex Black card guys, right? And they have to be almost
not the business centurion, the real black.
No, the real black, right? Like the one, the guy you could buy a Lambo on it, right? That guy, right? And I said, so while it's a phenomenal business, there's a handful of very select people you can do business with. So you're talking Bergdorf Goodman. We're talking Walmart. We're talking so compare the sales of Bergdorf Goodman to Walmart. I'll wait. Right? Mic drop moment. The bulge bracket in this market is everyone else. Everyone below that, $50 million apparatus. And look, while it's true that produce water, they are major polluters, okay? But the guys who are commissioning companies like Gradient to build them $100 million system, they're going to have 3, round-the-clock engineers running it. Capital's not an issue. And let's face it, they don't pollute anyway. They're not the polluters. It's the guy who is bound by financial constraints. that's forced to deal with an existential threat every month of his life. He's got that sword, sort of Damocles hanging over him. Do I cart this stuff away? Do I pay the fine? That sort of thing, right? It almost gets down to, in the business world, those folks are like you hear a lot of times in very hard times like we have right now, a lot of folks on Social Security that are choosing between food and medicine. Right? It's horrifying that we deal with this in the 21st century in America, but we do. But that's the life of a small to mid-sized local business owner every day, making life decisions on how they choose to die. Right? Because that's, do I starve or do I get sick from lack of medication? Businesses make these decisions every day. The ability to relieve that financial burden from them and them to have a sense of control over their operational expenses is wait till we can tell that story at scale. That's going to be a lot of fun.
And another thing that's going to be a lot of fun that AJ, Ken, and I were talking about in the marketing meeting today was that Ken is going to tell his origin story about how water.
I got bit by a radioactive spider.
Exactly.
Right.
The water on demand story, as told by, and he's going to tell it in a gripping way. It's going to be lots of fun, and we'll be featuring that. It's going to be, I think, because you have to bring it down to the relatable. And what we've been through over the last 3 years, I hope it's relatable.
Oh, it'll be relatable because most of these folks are business owners. They get it. They get that, pardon my French, everyone's had that oh shit moment, right? Oh shit, like that sort of thing, right? And I think that when I provide kind of the backstory and the context and how we arrived at this thing, a lot of folks who have run businesses all their lives are going to go, I had a moment like that too, right? Ours just happened to be, so serendipitous in terms of right place, right time. It was really, I've often joked with Riggs that, going to church has done me well, AJ, because I have an angel on my shoulder. Because every time, when we had a choice to go right or left, without having to agonize over it, we made the turn. And it put us, even the mistakes that we've made, Riggs, and there have been a few, one or two. Wow. Yeah, it's true. No, it's true. They'll come out in the book version. All right. Even the mistakes we made, thank God we made them. We ended up in so much better place, right?
Well, that's the philosophy. It's not serendipitous. What happens is we've been doing this hovering over the target. Whoa, like when I try and find my AirPods using Find My, and it goes, you're near, you're far, you're near, you're far.
Like a Geiger counter, right?
And okay, boom. And this is how we've done it. And thank heaven we have an amazing investor base that believes in us.
Absolutely.
It's enabled us to find the sweet spot. And that's what's exciting. All right. Well, next week, AJ, I'm going to be interviewing you.
Okay.
Because, we'll do it maybe beforehand or whatever, but sure. I want to do an interview too, so we get to know you, because what happens is we do this freewheeling interviews and then Ken starts talking and we're like, okay.
Once I start rolling, look, in all fairness, in the meeting, he monopolizes all of the airspace in the meeting. See,
bingo. So we're going to give him a shot. Yes. I'm going to do a one-on-one with him because I have big news coming about AJ relative to the company, and we want to get to know him because he is a real asset. He has brought process, and marketing is all about process, right? He's brought process to us.
Clarity from chaos.
Yep.
Exactly.
We simplify the complex.
Simplify the complex.
I like that. We should use that.
We should. Totally didn't take that from Dan. Totally.
Process, but adaptability as well. That's the key, right? Anyway, so look forward to an interview with AJ next week. Thank you all for coming. AJ in the house, as Marcus Walker says. Right. And the last message of the day, fill out your Zoom survey. It gives us vital information. Thank you all. It's been great having you.
And those of you who have attended who want to get that real, dissected view of circumstances, book a call with me.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good
night, guys.
It's been great. See you next week, and you'll hear more from AJ.
Mm-hmm.